no reason except to say it was the first post-war car that you could buy with performance options. You could buy it with dual carburetors, a bigger block engine. Nobody ever thinks of a Hudson Hornet as a muscle car. And then the muscle car era ended to some point, and we have a Grand National here. That's kind of near the end of the muscle car era, don't you think? Or how far back do you think we can take muscle cars before we say they ran out of steam?
Well, the muscle car, the real muscle car, I should say, ended probably in the mid, 1974 era. 1975 was at the end because of fuel regulations, emission regulations. The cars at that time were probably down to 8.5 to 9 compression compared back in the 69 and 70 where they were running a lot of cars 10.5 to 1 to 11.5 to 1 right out of the factory. And that vehicle I was just looking at, I just met the gentleman who owns it. I would say that's when the second muscle car generation is going to be started. Until that car came along and the little newer Mustangs, I mean, it's kind of revamping itself, but probably the 74 is when it ended.
Right. It's a difficult definition because not everybody's right. Arguably, if you take the position that any car that the factory sold you with performance option was a souped-up car, the souped-up car is different from a muscle car. And of course, a hot rod is one that you did yourself. Well, everything here basically is a factory option. Is that pretty much right?
Correct.
So the factory options and why they were factory options, how you verify the factory options, the rarity and relative commonness of cars with different options are what makes the muscle car hobby so interesting, because like anything else that you study, the more you get into it, the more complex it seems, and this is why we have somebody like Rob to work it out. When did you first get involved in muscle cars? When did you first get a passion for them?
I would say probably I was roughly about 13 years old.
Just like everybody else.
Yes, exactly. Back in the day, that's what it was. And make a long story short, I mean, I wasn't the best at school. I had a problem reading and writing. And make a long story short, when I grew up, they didn't catch it until I was almost in 12th grade. I had dyslexia. So everybody couldn't figure out why I couldn't read, why wasn't I just doing well in school. And luckily, it's kind of the same field where you came from. They say in any kind of disability, if you lose your eyesight, your smell, and your feel gets real good. Well, I developed a photogenic memory. And that's kind of what started it. I did do well in school, and I started working in a local corner gas station at 13 years old. At 13, that's when the 68, that's still one of my favorite cars, the 68 big block Chevelles were out, the 67s, and a lot of the fellas that I worked for were into the GTOs, the Chevelles, the Camaros were just getting real strong, and I couldn't get one. They let me work on it a little bit, but, and that's how I got into enjoying the muscle cars, and that's really where the love and the passion of the cars came from.
So you can tell us the serial number of all of these cars?
I can't tell you the serial numbers, I can tell you what motor's in them.
Well, when you approach a muscle car, either to buy it for yourself or to buy it for a client, do you have any specific criteria that you rely on? I mean, in other words, you're not going to deal with, say, an engine switch, or you're not going to deal with a car that's not numbers matching. I mean, do you have any criteria that you either for yourself or for your recommendation?
Well, for myself, I mean, and there again, like you said, this business is a secondary business for us. We're an automotive business, and collision business, and towing business is my main business. The museum and the car sales we've been doing for about 2 years now. When it comes to the cars that I collect, I deal with all numbers matching cars. And there again, that is one of the biggest problems that I do come across when I do try to buy them, because especially with the computers today with eBay and all the advertising, I mean, you can find cars all over the world, as you know, as you chased your cars all over the world.
Right.
And when what they tell you and what you find are two different things.
Right.
I mean, my first question I do is I'll ask, is it a numbers matching car? And they have it priced like it's about a numbers matching car. And so many people think that a date-coded car is a numbers matching car. A numbers matching car is the motor that was born in the car. Before 67, like especially Chryslers, they're not stamped with VIN numbers. After 67, Chrysler started putting the VIN number in the block. Ford didn't do a real good job on it either. Chevy has always been one of the better stamped motors, and the Pontiacs were clearly stamped from 67 up, and probably even a little earlier. The 69 cars, the 70s, the VINs were always on the block, right behind the alternator. And there again, when I look at them, one of the biggest thing I do, because you see the LS6 there, there's a Coco in the back, there's the Yanko. The fraud in this business is so bad. That's the biggest thing I look out for. If somebody asks me to go find them a car, I know what the broach marks look like. I can tell if they've been sanded. I can tell. And that's one of the problems that you got to watch when if you have a muscle car and you're rebuilding the motor, and the speed shop that you're using says, or the machine shop says, we need to deck the block. Say, no, we're not decking the block, because when you deck the block, it takes the VIN number off. If the top of the block is warped at all. So you got to be very careful. So you got to have pictures. But that's what I do, Fred, because no offense or buts. And my biggest thing is everybody works real hard for the money. And you did ask me earlier, and it was a real good question. Why do I deal with, if this was a stock market, why are you messing with the blue chip stock? God forbid, this economy has not been the best. And a good car, a numbers matching car, you can always sell. Somebody's out there that wants the real deal. It's a safety issue for me.
The best of the best has held its value.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite? Everybody asks you that. They always ask me that.
Well, it changes every day.
You think? Right, yeah. It depends on how you feel when you look at it.
I mean, probably my favorite is the Yanko car, just because the color, the stripes, and then sometimes I look back and the 70 Camaro there. I mean, it was 600 from built. It's a 375 car, and that's why I wasn't where I bought it. I wasn't looking for one, but there again, it's just something about it. It's plain, but it's pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think? Right now, I mean, we're talked about the beginning and kind of end of that 60s so-called up and back muscle car era. Do you think there's a new muscle car era coming? And do you think anything that's made today in Detroit will be a future muscle car, a future collectible?
Yeah, I think it's going to come back around. If you look at what the manufacturers are doing now you talk about these cars. I mean, the highest horsepower that was rated was 450 horsepower in the LS6. Probably if you dynoed it, it's probably close to 500. You look at the Challengers now today, the SRT8s, 470 horsepower, right out of the factory, and they look like the old Challengers. There's one right here with the yellow Challenger. The Boss 302 that just came out for the money is one of the fastest quarter-mile cars. Think it with a small block. I mean, think going like 1170s today. Wow. So do I think it's going to be? Yeah, they have the new Camaro out with 550 horsepower. The ZR1 Corvette 638. So yeah, I think it's starting all over again. It's what started the muscle car. It was between Ford, Chrysler, and GM. Who could put out the fastest car? And I think it's coming down to that now, because you get Ford it's a Shelby, but get a Super Snake 750 horsepower out of the factory.
Yeah, well, that's competition seems to breed that.
Yeah.
One thing that's very personal to me, and I think I'm a little crazy about this, but still personal to me, is the original car. By the original car, I mean the car that's never been repainted, it still has its upholstery. It's not 100 points, it may not be 80 points. But, I do get a little irritated, because I am an old guy, and I see in our era, when you had like an old Cord or an old Duesenberg or something, and you banged up the fender, you sat there and pounded it out and smoothed it out and painted it. Now you call Mustangs Unlimited, and they send you a new fender.